Resourceful Designer, episode 56, How to Get Out of a Productivity Slump.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He has way too many keys on his keychain, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so happy that you plugged me into your ears today in order to discuss our graphic design businesses. I've been having a great week so far. Yesterday, I got up, sat down at my computer, checked my email, and then I grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil and I wrote down all the things I had to do that day. And then, one by one, I started checking them off as I went throughout the day. And by 4 o'clock, I had actually checked off everything on my list, which was great. Normally I don't reach the end of my list. I write down all the things I want to do, and I'm happy if I get a few of them checked off. But in this case, I was able to check every one off. In fact, I even went so far as to add on a few things at the end of the day I wanted to do. My son has a website he's working on, and he needed some help, so I took some time to help him and to go in and tweak some things on that website. So overall, a very productive day. Now, that might be kind of ironic considering that today's topic is how to get out of a productivity slump. But even if you have a great day like I just had, there will come a time where the opposite will happen. But before we get to this week's topic, I want to share the resource of the week. Now, this week's resource is a podcast. Now, I know you enjoy podcasts because you're listening to this one. Now, this week, the podcast is called The Productive Woman. Now, you may be saying, well, Mark, what do you mean the productive woman? Guys out there, you're saying, well, I'm a guy. Why would I listen to a productive woman podcast? Well, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast. First of all, it's put out by Laura McClellan. Now, I know Laura. We're in a mastermind group together. And when we were in this group together, I decided I want to get to know the other people in the group. So I started listening to Laura's podcast, thinking, I'd listen to a couple of episodes just to see what she's all about. And it turned out that I really, really love this podcast. She has very, very actionable tips and advice in order to remain productive. Now, the description on the podcast is it's a podcast intended to help busy women find the tools and encouragement they need to better manage their lives, their time, their stress, and their stuff so that they can accomplish the things that matter to them. Now, as I said, the podcast is geared to women. It's called The Productive Woman. And all of Laura's guests that she has on the show are women. And she has a private Facebook group that you need to be a woman to get in. But that still doesn't mean that men can't get a lot of value out of this. In fact, as I said, I listened to the first couple of episodes just because I wanted to know what Laura did. And I loved it so much that I stayed subscribed. And I can't wait every week when the new episode comes out. No, it's not geared towards me because, of course, I'm a man. But the content she puts out is very relevant and actionable. And I think it would benefit you in your design business. So if you're interested in checking out The Productive Woman, visit theproductivewoman.com. And if you ever decide to reach out to Laura for any reason, let her know that you heard about her on The Resourceful Designer. And now, how to get out of a productivity slump. It's nice to think that we've got everything under control, that we're on top of our game, that our business is running like a well-oiled machine. But unfortunately, that isn't always the case. There will be times when everything just piles up. You feel tired, overwhelmed. You have no idea how you got here or how to get out of the hole you've dug yourself into. You feel stuck and there's no obvious path out. You've found yourself in a productivity slump. You see, the problem with running a business is you want it to succeed. I know that sounds strange. If only everyone had the problem of a successful business. But that success is addictive. We crave more and more of it to the point where we tend to take on so much that all of a sudden, that success that we're craving is no longer an option because we have way too much to do. It's at that point that things fall in on us and we start experiencing that feeling of being overwhelmed and not sure what to do next. And oftentimes, that feeling of not knowing what to do next leads to the productivity slump. Now, perhaps you can't relate to that scenario. Perhaps your business is doing well, but you haven't reached that level of success I'm talking about. But that doesn't mean you're immune to the situation. Sometimes a productivity slump hits us for no particular reason. You sit down at your computer or your tablet or your easel or whatever it is you use, and you just don't feel motivated enough to actually work. Instead, you dawdle around a bit. Maybe you see what's happening on Facebook. Maybe you watch a couple of YouTube videos. You find every excuse in the book not to work. This is also a productivity slump. Taking on too many jobs all at once, causing some of them to fall behind or maybe take a little bit longer than they originally were anticipated. This can also lead to a productivity slump. Now, regardless of the path that led you there, being in a slump is no fun at all. And if you don't find your way out, it could be a problem that could compound and grow larger and larger. So, what do you do? Well, here are a few of my suggestions. First off, in order to get out of a productivity slump, you need to know exactly what got you there in the first place. So, you know me, I like pencil and paper. So grab a pencil and paper and write down everything that is contributing to the problem. Every project that you have that feels out of control, every task that needs doing, write down everything, no matter how trivial. And don't forget to include other parts of your business as well, such as paying bills, research, meetings, and all that other stuff, as well as stuff happening in your out of business life or your daily life. You have kids that need medical appointments and you have to call and arrange everything. Does your car need to be brought in for an oil change? All these things can add up as well in order to create that productivity slump as you're thinking of all these different things that need to be done, whether they're business related or life related. The more you write down, the easier it'll be to sort through everything. Now, once you write down everything that needs to be done, it's time to categorize your list. Is there anything on the list that you can simply forget about? If it's not that important, delete it. Is there anything on the list that can be put off to a later time? If so, reschedule it. Is there anything on the list that someone else can do instead of you? If so, delegate it. Don't forget, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Back in episode 45 of Resourceful Designer, titled "It's Okay for Graphic Designers to Ask for Help," I talk about this topic where sometimes you're capable of doing something, but you might not necessarily be the perfect person or the right person for the job. So it's okay to go out and hire and look for people to do those jobs. And you can get that episode by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 45. Now, I have a virtual assistant that I can assign certain tasks to. Simple things like updating WordPress plugins. I have a whole bunch of clients that are running WordPress. And if you're familiar with WordPress, you know that those plugins are constantly being updated. Well, I could go in on a regular basis and update these plugins for all my different clients, but that seems to me like a waste of my time. So I have a virtual assistant that I pay once a month, and she goes into all my client websites and updates WordPress, updates the plugins, updates the themes, and make sure everything works and stays up to date because that's more secure. And by hiring her to do this, I'm paying her a little bit and she's happy and she goes in. As I said, she does this once a month and it has freed up so much of my time. I don't have to worry about this. It's one less thing on my list that I have to do, that I have to worry about. Are my clients' websites secure? Are they up to date? I know it is because I've hired somebody to do it. So is there anything on your list that you can hire out or get help with? Now, once you've gone through your list and you've eliminated all these things, what's left are the things that need to be done either now or soon. You have to take those items and prioritize them. Which are the most important and which ones are not so important? They're all important, but some of them might have more importance than others. Now you have to take a look at each item on the list. And you have to break each one down into smaller tasks, things that can be done in one sitting. If you can't complete it in one sitting, then it's not a task, it's a project. Now, big projects should be and can be broken down into first smaller projects, and then those smaller projects can be broken down into tasks. As I said, a task, something that can be done in one sitting. So the trick is to break them down and make them more manageable. You see, most of the time, a productivity slump is because we're feeling overwhelmed. It's because we're thinking too big. we're looking at projects as a whole instead of their individual pieces. And sometimes it just seems so much, especially if you have a whole bunch of projects on the go all at once. Now, once you start looking at the individual pieces, it becomes much easier to start knocking them off your list one by one and digging your way out. Here's an example. Say you've been hired to brand a brand new startup. They've brought you on board. They're starting up. They're going to be opening up some store, and they want you to design the logo, the stationery, the marketing material, the website, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe they're doing bus signage and billboards, and maybe if it's a restaurant, there's a menu or whatever. That is a big project. But each one of those things is actually a smaller project within the larger project. The logo is one project. Designing the stationery is another project. Marketing material is another project. The website, another project, etc. Now, let's just take one of them. Let's take the logo design, for example. It's probably the first one you'll work on. I mean, you can't really design the marketing material and the stationery and everything else if you don't already have the logo design. So chances are the logo is going to be the first thing you're going to work on. Now, when I design a logo, I always start off with the font, or I say always, but I'd say the majority of the time I start off with the font. And I'll spend maybe an hour, maybe two, sometimes even more, going through all the fonts that I have access to and writing down on a piece of paper. Again, I like pencil and paper. I'll write down all the fonts that I think would be good for this logo. Now, I've mentioned before on the podcast, I use a program called Suitcase Fusion by Extensis. And what I like about Suitcase Fusion is they have this quick type feature where you can type in whatever you want, a word, a sentence, and it'll show you every font that you have in your system, those words in those fonts. So whatever the name of the company is that you're branding, whatever the text of the logo will be, I always go in and I type it in. And usually what I'll do is I'll type it in once in upper and lowercase, and then again immediately after in all caps, just in case I decide to go all cap route. And then I go through my fonts one by one. It shows you a big list of all the fonts. These are fonts that are on your system, but not necessarily activated. That's the great thing about these font management tools is you can have thousands of fonts on your computer, but they're not all active all at once. You can turn them on and off as needed. But something like Suitcase allows you to look at all of them, even if they're not activated. So I'll go through my fonts, and if it's a logo that maybe I want something with a hand style font, looks like it was handwritten, or maybe I'm looking specifically for a serif font or a sans serif font, or something that's maybe a little bit more funky or whatever the case. I've got a whole bunch of different folders divided up into different fonts that I can look at, or I can just look at my library as a whole and look at every font. And maybe I'll take an hour or two and go through them and say, okay, I like that font. No. Oh, maybe that one. And I write them down on a piece of paper. Then once I'm done doing that, I will open up Adobe Illustrator and I will type out the name of the company. And then I will put it in. I'll grab the first font in my list and I'll put that in that font. Then I'll duplicate that and then change it to the next font and duplicate in the next font and so on until my page is filled with the name of the company written in every single font that I had gone through and chosen while going through Suitcase Fusion. Now, what this allows me to do is I look at the actual words. Yes, I saw them in Suitcase, but now I get to compare them side by side. Sometimes there might be two fonts that look very, very close together. Maybe it's two sans serif fonts and they're very close. Maybe it's just one letter. The letter A or the letter E or something is a little bit different. And I'll put them next to each other and say, okay, which one do I like better? I like this one better. I'll delete the other one. And I'll slowly go through because sometimes once you actually look at it, you'll realize, that font just doesn't do it for me. Delete it. And I'll weed my way through until I'm down to, sometimes it'll be a dozen fonts. Sometimes it might be 24. Sometimes it might only be 3 or 4 fonts that I narrow it down to. Regardless of how many I've narrowed it down to, I then go in and I pick maybe 2 or 3 of them that are my top contenders. And those 2 or 3 top fonts are what I'm going to take and design the logo with. But at this point, once I've selected those top 2 or 3 fonts, I can scratch this off my list. This part of the project, the logo design, which is a project in itself, if it's divided into individual tasks, I've just completed one task. So I've settled on 3 different fonts. If I'm going to give the client 3 different logo variations, if I'm only going to give 2, then I'll settle on 2 different fonts. That task is done. I can scratch that off and I don't have to worry about that anymore. I have the logos, I have the font selected. Now it's up to me. Do I want to move on to the next task in that project? Maybe start fiddling around with that, or maybe I want to move on to is there going to be any icons or symbols or anything to go along with the logo? I can start working on that. Or I can just move on and do a completely different task for a completely different client. Maybe somebody emailed me and said there's something on their website they'd like to change. There's a paragraph they don't like. They want to change that paragraph. Well, that's a quick and easy job to do, and it's on my list of things to do. Why don't I whip that one off? There's no saying I have to continue with the logo. I finished that task. I've selected my fonts. So now I can move on and update this website. It might take me 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do whatever needs to be done. And there's something else I can scratch off my list. And then I look at my list and I say, well, what's next? What else can I do? Maybe it's going back to that logo design with the fonts that I selected, or maybe it's something completely different. The trick is to work at each of these tasks one by one until you slowly climb out of your productivity slump. Now, you may be saying, well, that's great, Mark, but what if looking at all those smaller tasks still leaves you feeling overwhelmed? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here are some tips. When you're working, maybe it's time when you're feeling overwhelmed in a productivity slump, whatever, change your environment. If you're working on a laptop, then it's easy for you to pick up and go somewhere else. Now, somewhere else could just mean move out of your office into the dining room, into the bedroom, outside on a deck, bring a lawn chair out into the lawn. If you have a balcony, go sit out on the balcony, or go down to a Starbucks or a coffee shop or wherever, a park, and sit there and work there. Just sometimes changing your environment will help you get out of that slump. Maybe it's something as simple as turning on music. I don't like working with music on. I never, but to be honest, I don't listen to music at all. Whenever I'm about, I usually listen to podcasts or nothing at all. I'm not a big music person. But if I'm in one of those slumps, sometimes I will. Now, if I'm going to turn on music, it'll be classic 80s, early 90s type music that I'll listen to, maybe even some 70s stuff. I'm not into the newer stuff. But I will do that from time to time. Now, as I said, it's rare because I don't listen to a lot of music. But I'll put it on softly and it'll just get me going, and maybe enough to help me get into the work routine again and get going. Now, if you're already somebody that plays music while you work, try different music, different type. Go from whatever, country to rock or rock to hip hop or classical music or instrumental or whatever. Now, I mentioned if you have a laptop, I don't have a laptop. I have an iMac. So in a case like that, maybe there's something you can do that doesn't involve sitting in front of your computer. If you have a mobile phone or a tablet like an iPad or something like that, there's nothing stopping you. If you have a project and you have to find stock photos, do you know you can search for stock photos just as easily on an iPad than you can on a computer? So if you have a project that you need to search for a specific stock photo, pick up your iPad, pick up your phone, change your environment, go somewhere else, go sit by the fireplace, go sit under a tree and look through them there. Once you figure out everything you need and what photo's best, then maybe you could come back to your computer and keep on working. You've completed one task by finding the photos that you need. And maybe changing your environment is what did it for you, helped you get through that. So changing your environment is a good way to help you get out of that slump. Now, another thing you can do is change your routine. You do the same thing every single day. Get up, have breakfast, maybe catch up on some news or some social media, and then sit down in front of your computer and get to work. Well, why not change things up a bit? If that same routine is getting dull and you're not motivated to work, change it up. Instead of sitting down at the computer after breakfast, go for a walk. Maybe do some chores that you would do in the evening. Maybe there's something you usually do after supper. Maybe you're one of those people that leaves dishes throughout the day and you do the dishes after dinner. Well, maybe after breakfast, instead of just putting them on the counter and leaving them for the end of the day, why don't you do the dishes then? Maybe there's something else you can do. Go outside and mow the lawn, vacuum the house, do the laundry, get something, just get out of your routine. Heck, Turn on Netflix, put in a movie, sit down and watch a TV show instead of getting to work. Oh, I know that's sacrilegious, but you know what? That's the great thing about being a home-based designer. If your routine is getting to you, it is so simple to change it up. We have that privilege. We are so blessed that we have that opportunity. People that work at an agency or work at some company, they can't do that. They can't just say, I don't feel like working now, I'll work later. They work specific times. If they work 9 to 5, they have to be productive between 9 to 5. And if you get into a productivity slump during those hours, it is really tough. But us being at home, you can work for 2-3 hours in the morning. And then if you want to, go out to your local pool and go for a swim or go for a run or do whatever, you have that prerogative. You can do that. Change your routine in order to help you out. It's one of the big perks of being a home-based designer. If you usually get up in the morning, do your work, and that's it. Maybe, as I said, don't work in the morning, start at noon, and work into the evening. Now, that's a little bit harder said than done if you have a family, especially if you have kids. They're going to want to spend some time with you. But maybe, there has been times where after my kids, when they were younger and they went to bed, or my wife was in bed or fell asleep on the couch or whatever, I would just get up slowly, come onto the computer, and I would do some work. We have that prerogative. Doing that sort of thing, changing your routine, can help you get out of productivity slump. But whatever you do, simply remember that wherever you are or whenever you do finally sit down to work, you need to choose one task to work on, and you don't get up until it's completed. You have to get into that rhythm when you start on things. And that's why I said, if you break things up into small tasks, it makes it so much easier. I couldn't sit down and start looking at fonts for a logo and only get through half of my font list. And then if I had to stop and maybe pick up the next day, I wouldn't have that momentum going of what I like and what I don't like. As I'm going through the list, I'm saying, yes, no, 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 yes, no, yes, yes, no, no. I'm looking at all these fonts. Well, if I had to stop halfway through and then pick up again at a later time, it might not feel the same. I might not be in the same mood. And maybe all of a sudden the fonts I'm picking on the second half are completely different. And who knows, maybe that might help and turn out to be a great design choice. But your best pick tasks that you can do in one sitting. And that's why it's important to break things down into small, doable chunks. And once this is done, you scratch it off your list and move on to the next one. And I promise you, you'll feel both physically and mentally lighter with each task that you scratch off, because your list will be getting shorter and shorter. The project themselves might not be getting done, but you're getting that one step closer to getting it done. Just like any good battle plan, the simplest strategy is to divide and conquer. So divide your projects up into their individual tasks and conquer them one at a time. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Now, I would love to know your way of getting out of a productivity slump. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 56 and leave me a comment there and let me know, what do you do when you feel that way, when you feel overwhelmed? There's so much to do. There's so much work that's going on that you don't know what to do next. And it gets to the point where maybe you don't want to do any work because of that feeling. What do you do to get out of it? Let me know. I would love to hear it. And now it's time for the question of the week. Now, this week's question came in from somebody that asked me not to reveal their name, so I'm going to abide by that. But this is the question they asked. They said, my business has come to a stop because my mother's health issues, and I've found myself having less and less time to attend to my business. This is really out of my control. Once I was self-sufficient financially. Now I'm finding there's no income coming in. I really do not have much options as far as having someone to help with my mother's illness. Currently into my 4th month visiting her in a hospital in a different town. I can go on, but what do you think one can do to pick up business or return to what it was? My friends tell me nothing is forever. I know many business owners do not talk about their weaknesses, but possibly this topic is something that many people are facing, and your opinion would be valuable. Well, thank you very much for this question. And you know something? This is something I can actually relate to. My mother passed away in 2013, and it wasn't something quick. My mother was diabetic, and she ended up having a stroke, and it was a severe enough stroke that she wasn't, you can tell that although she was responsive, she wasn't fully there afterwards. And my brothers and my father and I, finally, we after a while and the doctors, the prognosis not looking good, we came to the decision that the best thing to do was to stop my mom's dialysis and just let nature take its course. Now, during that period, which lasted several weeks, and then of course, after she passed and lasted several more weeks after that, it was really tough on my business because I'm a one-man show and I wasn't into it. I didn't want to come and work. There was so much going on that I let my business suffer. So I can relate. You're talking about fourth month. Mine didn't go on that long, but I can relate to what you're talking about. Also, my dad, who is now in a retirement home, he has dementia and I'm his quote unquote caregiver. I have to do a lot of stuff for him. I take a lot of time away from my business when he has one of his many doctor's appointments. I'm the only one around. My brothers don't live, or my other brother passed away recently. My brother doesn't live nearby. So I'm the one that takes him to everything. And that does take a toll on my business. So I can relate to what you're going through. Now, what I can tell you is that after my mother passed away, and I can tell you probably from the time she had the stroke to the time she passed, to the time we had the funeral and everything, it was probably just a little bit more than a month that I really hadn't done very much work, if any at all. I can tell you that one, clients are very accommodating when it comes to something like this. It's a lot easier when you're a one-person individual than when it's a company. If you hire a company to do something, you expect results. If you hire an individual to do something, yes, you expect results, but you also expect that that person has to lead a life. If you're hiring an agency and the designer that's working on your job, something happens to them and they can't work on it, you are expecting the agency to find somebody else to do the job. But somebody that hires an individual designer does understand that if something happens that is beyond your control, like this case with your mother, it's okay. Life goes on. And you might end up losing the clients. That is a possibility. But if you have a good relationship built up with them, those clients will come back. I know for a fact that I had clients that when stuff happened, they told me, even work that was like, we had a deadline, there was a rush and stuff. All of a sudden, they said, "Oh, Mark, don't worry about it. That deadline's not important anymore. We can push it off, or, we will manage without this for now." My clients were very accommodating in those situations. Now, there were a few clients that couldn't put something off because of a deadline or whatever, and they ended up going to somebody else. And you know what? I didn't lose them. They might have had a great time, a great job, great experience with another designer, but I had built up the relationship with them over a long period of time that once I was back on my feet and I was working again, they started bringing the work back to me, regardless of what the situation. I don't think in that time I lost a single client. So your customers will understand. Now, the thing to also think about is if you are an experienced designer and you have to take this time off, whenever things do come around, because as your friends tell you, nothing lasts forever. Either, I don't know the situation, either your mom's going to get better or, I feel for you. Maybe things will go to the worse and who knows, but at some point you might not have to be taking care of your mom anymore. At that point, you should know that if you are a successful designer and you're running a successful business, you've been doing it for a while, you should have no trouble bouncing back to where you were. Whether you get your original clients back or just finding new clients, once you're back, you will be back. And chances are you'll be back with a renewed vigor. I don't know if you're like me, but when I step away, when I go on holidays or if I take time off and I'm not designing, when I get back, I'm just itching. I have to do something. I want to do something. And that really helped me after my mom, because as I said, it was probably a month that I took off, if not a little bit more. I don't know exactly. Plus a lot of other appointments and stuff. So even when I came back, I wasn't putting in a full week. But during that time, when I came back, I was so gung-ho. I just had to, my creative juices had been stagnant for so long. I wanted to design stuff, and I probably designed some of the best stuff that I did. And my clients were so pleased, and everything just picked up from that point. So yes, your friends are right. Nothing lasts forever. And whatever is over, one way or the other, you will get back to it. And your business will thrive from that point forward, just like it was doing beforehand. You said you had a successful business beforehand. There's no reason why you can't again afterwards. Now, I do want to mention a few things. You mentioned that you don't have anybody to help you with your mom, but you mentioned that she's in a hospital. A hospital offers a lot of help. I know when my mom was in the hospital, and my dad just a couple of months ago broke his hip and he was in the hospital for 2 months. During that time, I felt like I needed to go visit him all the time because he didn't really know anybody. But the thing is there was other people at the hospital he was talking to. There was the support staff that he was talking to. There was the physiotherapists he was talking to. There were the nurses and the doctors he was talking to. He was actually getting a lot more attention than he normally would when he was back at home. So I don't want to say that you shouldn't be visiting your mom because I don't know the situation, but maybe you don't have to visit your mom as much as you are. Again, I don't want to suggest anything without knowing exactly your situation, but there is a lot of help at these hospitals, and it's okay if you take time off. Like maybe instead of going to visit your mom every day, you go visit her every other day. And that's what I ended up doing at the hospital. At first, when my dad broke his hip, I was there every single day. But then after a while, when I started realizing that, he was doing okay and that he had all this support and everybody helping him, and that I started going every other day. And then towards the end of the 2 months, I'll be honest, I was going maybe every third day or maybe like 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week, depending. And that allowed me to take those in-between days in order to work on my business and catch up and not fall too far behind. Now, again, I let my clients know what was going on, and there were some projects that stretched out much longer than I had originally anticipated, but my clients were very accommodating. They understood my situation. And as I said at the beginning, whenever you're an individual, the clients will know that sometimes life gets in the way. Unlike if they were hiring an agency, they would just expect that that person would step aside and somebody else would step in and take their place. So maybe that's an option for you, is only going to see your mom, cut down the amount of visits. Because after all, what would your mom want? Would your mom want your business to suffer and possibly fail because of her? Probably not. So, but again, I hate to give you this advice not knowing the actual situation. But overall, things will work out in the end. Will you lose clients? Possibly. But you've built up this business once before. There's nothing stopping you from doing it again. So I hope that kind of answers your question. As I said, it's a really difficult one without knowing your exact situation. But as you said, maybe other people are going through something similar. And whenever life gets in the way, you have to deal with life. But you also have to remember that your business will be there when you come back. If you can put in some time during the period where there's issues or where you can't, if you can squeeze in a couple of hours here to do stuff, maybe not take on any new clients or new projects, but if somebody emails you and there's a problem with something and it's only going to take you 10 minutes, take that 10 minutes to go in and fix it. And when when everything calms down and everything gets back to normal and you get back to your business, everything should pick up and be just like it was before, if not better, as I said, with that renewed vigor. So hopefully that helps you, and it helps anybody else that may be going through the same situation. I feel for you, but that's just one of the things we have to put up with as a solo graphic designer working from home. There are so many perks, but sometimes there is a little bit of a downside, and that's one of them. So good luck. I wish you all the best with your mom, and I'm sure things will work out for you. So that's it for this week's episode. I haven't decided what next week's podcast will be about, so I'm not going to tell you anything here. I do want to remind you about this week's resource, which is the Productive Woman podcast that you can get. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on, I think, all the popular places for podcasts, or you can visit theproductivewoman.com. And remember, guys, even though it's called The Productive Woman, she has some really good advice. And I've learned a lot from her podcast, even though I'm not her target audience. So you can check that one out. And something I haven't mentioned in quite a while is my 4-week marketing boost guide, which you can get by visiting marketingboost.net. Or if you're in the US, you can text marketing boost, one word, to 44222. And that'll get you access to my 4-week marketing boost, which is a little ebook I put together that gives you 20 to 30 minute tasks that you can do over a period of 20 days, so one per day, in order to create the best first impression on your website so that new clients that are coming to you get, as I said, the best first impression of who you are. So if you haven't already downloaded it, visit marketingboost.net, or in the US, text Marketing Boost, all one word, to 44222. So that's it for this week's episode. If you've enjoyed this episode and you think anybody else can benefit from it, please share it with a fellow graphic designer. I would be forever grateful. You could follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/resourcefuldesigner. I'm on Twitter at resourcefuld. And don't forget our Facebook group. We just passed 130 members, and you can join by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/group. So that's it for me. I wish you all the best in your graphic design business. And until next time, I'm Mark Decote, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.